friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Beanie Yo 486. Day in the neighborhood. My brothers and sisters, the weekend is upon us once again, my friends. And we about to start this weekend off right. Because we going back to who? Adrian from Coffeehouse. Crime! The Coffee Man Fridays, y'all. And the title of the video is From Teen Victim to Murdering Her Manipulator, the case of Killer Sarah. Now, I just feel like these one of those videos, y'all, where the whole time I'm gonna be going back and forth on should Killer Sarah actually be charged with murdering her manipulator. You know what I'm saying? Because she was the victim in this story. She was the victim, and she probably got pushed to the point where she felt like she had no other choice but to murder this person. I don't know, y'all. I already feel like I'm gonna go back and forth on should she go to prison for the rest of her life, or is she justified in doing what she did. I don't know, but we finna see. But before we see, my brothers and sisters, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need, please. We back to the Coffee Man on another Friday. Y'all got what y'all need. Y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
Harold was a respectful man in his local community, or so everyone thought. But when word broke out of his terrible behavior towards 18-year-old Sarah McLean, the news was sure to turn heads. Unfortunately for Harold, it was already too late. He had manipulated a vulnerable woman who, unbeknownst to him at the time, would eventually snap back in the most violent of ways. And all of a sudden, our predator had become the prey. So, who precisely is Harold Sasko? What did he do to Sarah Gonzalez McLean? How would she react to his unbearable pressure? And what would her punishment ultimately be? Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're looking at a case that explores the moral complexities of a victim-turned-killer. Now, our assailant today is not your typical run-of-the-mill murderer. In fact, many argue that they shouldn't be in prison to this day. And so, let's explore this, quite frankly, wild story and see which side of the fence you land on. By the way, I post stories like this weekly, so if it is your sort of thing, please consider subscribing. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Sarah Gonzalez McLean.
Get whatever you may need. And the first thing that just jumped out to me before we even get into the video, y'all, is the age difference, man. This is a 18-year-old little girl. I know at 18 you are technically an adult. Some people say 21, some people say 18, tomato to freaking model. But all I'm saying is, man, in my eyes, 18, you still a freaking child, man. And this old freaking dude, he got gray hair, my brothers and sisters. There is no reason for him to even be involved with an 18-year-old in this type of way. It's already getting crazy, y'all, and we ain't even got started. But let's go.
Welcome back to Kansas, folks, also known as the Sunflower State. Home to almost 3 million residents, Kansas is one of the less populated states in America. But let me tell you, behind all of that corn, there is plenty of mystery and wonder if you go looking for it. Due to its extensive rural and flat land, it has become an agricultural powerhouse in recent decades. Of course, being responsible for producing large quantities of wheat, corn, sunflowers, and soybeans for the world to enjoy. It is also rather famous for its beef, which, no surprise, makes it well known for its American barbecues. Today, we're focusing on the eastern city of Lawrence near Kansas City, and here lived a 52-year-old man named Harold Sasko, better known for the rest of this video as Hal. Born on September the 11th, 1961 in Titusville, Florida, he was one of 12 siblings, consisting of 8 boys and 4 girls. His brothers and sisters described him as the type to take charge in almost any situation, often delegating chores to his parents and other siblings around the house, and just in general being very organizational. And so, it was no surprise that, after studying at college in Oklahoma, Hal would go on to start his own pizza restaurant and even open a second one just 2 years later, naming both of them as Cece's Pizza. This led him to move to Lawrence in the late 1990s, where, alongside his then-wife Anna and their 3-year-old daughter Amanda, he opened a third restaurant nearby in the town named Topeka. Now, Hal became addicted to his business, and his work hard and only work hard lifestyle was not one that his wife was comfortable pursuing. I mean, there has to be a healthy balance in everything that we do, right? Hal was not just a business owner, but a husband and father too, and his wife and child deserved his presence. Eventually, this caused a massive rift between both parents, and when his wife could no longer bear living as a lonely mother anymore, the two decided to divorce. Hal was an avid churchgoer, and he prided himself on not just being a man of the Lord, but also a well-respected member of the community. He was known by others to be kind, caring, and above all else, a very organizational manager. So, it would come as a real shock to the community when, on January the 17th, 2014, their so-called kind and caring manager suddenly disappeared.
And I was just about to say that, y'all. You be looking at people from the outside looking in, like this guy, for example, Hal or Harold. You know what I'm saying? A successful businessman. He a God-fearing man. You know, he got his religion with Christianity or whatever. He looked like a very successful guy living life. And then all of a sudden he go missing. You be like, who the freak wanted to kill him? Of all people, who kidnapped him? But you never know the real story. And that's what we about to get.
The day began like any other Friday. With the weekend right around the corner, many people travelled to work to begin their daily routine. And of course, that would be no different for the employees at Cece's Pizzeria. The problem is that, after making their way to work, Hal's employees would be met with a silent and empty restaurant. Hal was usually there to unlock and open the kitchen, but this time, he was nowhere to be found. Even stranger, it had been multiple days since anyone had heard from him, and so, concerned for his well-being, his employees called the police and requested a welfare check at his home on West 26th Street. An officer was dispatched to his property later on that day, and after knocking at the front door, he too was met with silence. Knocking on the front window of the property, he then peered inside to see if anyone was home, and that is when he saw the shape of a man lying face down on the floor. Calling for backup, authorities forced their way inside. The man on the floor was confirmed to be Hal, and furthermore, he was lying in a pool of his own blood. It became evident from the outset that he had already passed away, and from the state of his body, it looked like he'd been dead for multiple days, and that, furthermore, this was no accident. His hands were restrained behind his back, with zip ties used to keep him under control. In addition to this, his feet had also been bound, and there was one other alarming detail. Hal's neck had been cut so deep that the bone within had been shattered, and with a cut so grievous and bloody, he had no chance of surviving. All of this was a very violent scene for officers to deal with. To add to the commotion, officers would also find several beer bottles across the room, alongside a phone and laptop that did not belong to Hal. They would also observe that Hal's car was absent from the driveway. Yet, the strangest evidence left behind was the word freedom, which had been haphazardly painted on the wall. No surprise, it had been written using Hal's blood. Classic.
Wow. They wrote it on the wall with his blood. But I feel like whoever did this, well, we know who did it at this point. I think her name's Selena. But her doing this is almost like giving yourself away. Like you leaving a clue that the police gonna eventually pick up on. Like this person, whoever did this, like they got some kind of personal vendetta against him. So let's go dig up all the people that we know in his personal life, and then we can piece together who would say the word freedom on the wall in his blood, and who hate him so much so they will freaking damn near cut his freaking neck off. Like it's one way to murder a person and just shoot them, but when you literally sitting right there trying to cut their freaking neck off, you really got a real hatred towards them. I'm just saying, y'all. Let's go.
Now, obviously, a sudden influx of officers in the area caused quite the attention from nosy neighbours, and so officers decided to use this to their advantage and ask plenty of questions. And this is how they learned that apparently Harold did not actually live alone. His neighbours claimed that he lived with who he called his teenage stepdaughter. This, of course, was very vital information for officers. Learning this, that there was now someone who didn't just know Hal very well, but was also in regular contact with him and the crime scene. Anyway, this so-called teenage stepdaughter was eventually identified to be 18-year-old Sarah Gonzalez McLean, and apparently she'd lived with him for the last 2 years of his life. But the thing is,
this just already threw a monkey wrench up in the situation, my brothers and sisters. I called her Selena a couple of seconds ago, but her name is Sarah. I'm tripping. But this just already just effed the whole story up for me because I didn't know she was living with him. Now, I ain't gonna say it yet. I'm not gonna say it. This is what actually happened, but just what if? What if he had been sexually assaulting her for the 2 years that she had stayed with him? Are y'all still gonna blame her for killing him? I don't know how the situation going down, but just the fact that she was living with him, now you can look at it and you can just imagine the abuse that she probably had went through. I may be jumping the gun. Let's see.
Sarah was not actually anywhere to be found. And of course, this was deeply concerning to the officers. I mean, they had no idea where she was. To begin with, could she possibly have been kidnapped? If the answer was yes, then was she at risk of being harmed? Or maybe, was she the one to be responsible for his murder? Finding Sarah was now the authorities' #1 priority, as they had no idea what exactly happened to her. She could have been kidnapped, a victim, a witness, a suspect, or maybe even none of the above. Either way, finding her was now absolutely necessary. Family members and friends were notified of the absolutely horrific crime, and a vigil for their lost member of the community was planned to be held 3 weeks later on February the 8th. The public was urged to contact Douglas County Crime Stoppers with any information regarding Sarah's whereabouts, with a reward of $1,000 if any helpful information came through. But before we find out what happened to Sarah, who exactly was she? How had she come to live with her supposed stepfather at 16? And how could someone so young be linked to the violent murder of Harold Sasko?
Let's see.
Starting from the beginning, Sarah Gonzalez McLean was born on July the 9th, 1994 in Topeka, Kansas. She completed a loving family of 5 alongside her brother and her sister. Throughout her childhood, Sarah was known as a timid yet kind child. After being homeschooled for many years, she didn't have many friends outside of her neighborhood. However, that's not to say that she didn't have a good upbringing. Her parents were lovely people, and she was always close to her sister. Unfortunately, when she was only a preteen, her parents would eventually decide to get divorced, which, at such an impressionable age, was sure to leave a substantial impact on her. Following her parents' divorce, her late childhood to teenage years would sadly only spiral downward. Sarah was rather naive after being sheltered by her parents, and as many of you know, with naivety often comes vulnerability. People who are willing to take advantage of that are sadly never far away. After the divorce, Sarah was inappropriately approached by a neighbor, and tragically was eventually molested in the process.
Oh.
This event had a significant impact on Sarah's nature and her behavior. She began began acting out in ways very much unlike her former self, almost certainly as if the child within her had disappeared. Very much to her mother's dismay, Sarah began to sneak out at night and hang out with the wrong crowd. To make matters worse, this would also lead to her often taking drugs and alcohol to drown her sorrows. It seemed that after her parents' divorce, Sarah no longer wanted to be within the family home, and so as a result, and at the age of 14, she secured a job to try and strike out and live on her own. And as you may have guessed already, this is when Cece's Pizzeria employed her. At the time of meeting Harold, he was 50 years old and almost 4 times her age. Now, at first, he may have seemed like your average manager, but let's just say that his reputation amongst staff was vastly different from the facade he thought he showed the world. For example, Hal told all the restaurant managers that they could only hire young, attractive women. I mean, that enough is one giant red flag. What?
That is a huge red flag. Like, you can post that flag into the earth and it's gonna be all over. You can see it from California to New York in the United States. That is a big, huge red flag, my brothers and sisters. Oh my God, man. I don't want to talk about this man because he deceased, but let's just hear the whole story before I give my full opinion, man. I don't want to say nothing bad about him. Rest in peace, but dude, you telling your freaking staff members to only hire young, attractive, young women? Like, what the, dude, you 50 some years old. Why are you even looking at these children? She 14, like she attractive. Why are you looking at a 14-year-old thinking she is attractive? That is creepy as F. I digress. Let's go.
While working at the pizzeria, Sarah would wake up, go to her job, clock out, and eventually return to her family home, saying that she would often spend her nights out drinking before stumbling back. According to some, the only time that she was sober was when she was at work, or at least as sober as she could be. That's because if you've ever gone to work in the morning after a night out, you'll know exactly what I mean.
Oh yeah.
Despite often turning up drunk and almost being fired several times over the months, she somehow miraculously kept her job. And that's because Hal seemed to take pity on her. He knew that she was vulnerable and needed some extra support. But moving into her 15th year, she tragically experienced yet another traumatic event. It was on one of those nights out that another man forced himself on her. To make things even worse, the scumbag even burned her with cigarette butts. I mean, what kind of sick person does that? Sarah's already fragile mental health entirely collapsed after this. She stopped going to work, lost her job, lost her friends, and slipped into a very dark place. And
we just got to keep in mind that she is a very young, teenager. You know what I'm saying? She 14, 15, and already done been sexually assaulted twice, molested, all that. She out on her own. She already a freaking alcoholic. She 15 years old and a freaking alcoholic, y'all. Like, she going through it, man. And freaking Hal probably not gonna make it no better. I'm not trying to make no excuses for what she did. I don't even know how I feel about that yet. But I'm just saying how she grew up is just terrible. What she went through as a little girl, man. 15, you still a little girl.
less than 1 year later, at the tender age of 16, she then tragically tried to take her own life. Now, thankfully, Sarah's family found her in just enough time to call an ambulance. She would go on to make a full recovery, but that was only after spending 5 months in hospital for recovery. The nice thing is, after being released from the hospital, Sarah would receive support from friends close and far. However, one of those messages in particular stood out, and that was from her old boss, Hal. Following her tragic ordeal, Hal offered to be her personal life coach or even guardian of sorts. He would do things like pick her up, take her out for food, and even allow himself to be a sounding board for whatever was on her mind. With no one else to turn to, Sarah would eventually lean into his support. It was during one of their outings at Taco Bell that she confided her entire story to him, that including her tragic encounters with the other men, the drinking, and all of the rest. Now, Hal knew that she wanted out of her family home, and after learning about the trauma that she had been through, He then offered her a place to stay in his own home with him, which does strike me as rather odd, by the way. Despite having a family home, here was this 50-year-old man offering her a place to stay, supposedly out of the goodness of his own heart. This all felt just a little bit iffy. The problem is, Sarah was vulnerable, lost, and hurt. Hal's suggestion offered her a way out of all of that, and so, at the age of 17, she accepted.
I'm with Coffee, man, y'all. Like, it just rubbed me the wrong way, man. Even if he is 100% doing it out of the goodness and the kindness of his freaking heart, it still just rubbed me the wrong way, man. Like, you a 50-plus-year-old man living by yourself, inviting a freaking 17-year-old little girl to come stay with you that is not your family. You don't freaking know her. You just know her life story from what she told you. And you know she real freaking vulnerable at this time. If anything, I'll just call the police. I'll call somebody to help her, but I can't help her. I can't let you come stay with me. If he really cared about her like that, I feel like it would have been better if he tried to, like, get her an apartment or a freaking hotel room, but to come stay with me part, I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way, y'all. It don't rub me the right way, I tell you that.
After moving in with Hal, things seemed to stabilize for a short while after. She found a new job away from the pizzeria. Hal took great care of her. Her dog moved in with her, and she was even thinking about college. But Sarah's mother was, quite understandably, not comfortable with the entire situation. She found Hal to be quite strange, and the whole thing just seemed to be very bizarre in general. I mean, quite honestly, I'm not surprised she felt that way. The problem is, whenever she brought this up with Sarah, it would always end in a massive fight, which of course further pushed her daughter away. Michelle didn't believe that Hal's intentions were always as innocent as he made them out to be. Even worse, she believed that her daughter was likely too naive and delusional to realize. I mean, it all made sense after all. After the divorce, her father had broken all contact, and now Sarah was trying to fill that void left behind. To make things even more creepy, Hal would eventually ask Sarah to start calling him Dad or Daddy. And then, of course, he would tell all the neighbors that she was his stepdaughter. No surprise, but Sarah's co-workers would eventually catch on to all of this and then ask her what her relationship was with Hal. I mean, it made all of them feel very uncomfortable. Now, whenever asked about it, Sarah insisted that he was merely her stepfather and nothing more. But
man, I don't know, y'all. I think the Coffee Man finna tell us that this whole time she been staying with him. Oh man, this sounds so sick, but I gotta say it. This whole time she been staying with him, they been having sex. I'm just gonna go and put it out there, y'all. I'm just gonna go and say it, because I know y'all was thinking about it like me. They probably was been having freaking sex, and he been grooming her to be his wife or something, man. But she just telling these people, even her mama included, her co-workers, everybody on the outside, that no, he's just my stepdad, all that. But on the inside, they sleeping in the same bed. I don't freaking know, man. This one right here kind of make my stomach hurt. This is freaking disgusting by this old dude.
from an outsider's perspective, a 50-year-old man had taken an attractive yet troubled 18-year-old girl into his home. And just maybe her peers were onto something, as once Sarah settled and became more comfortable in the house, Hal's boundaries and attitude began to shift, especially when she reached 18 years old. The change was quite alarming, by the way. Hal began to buy her drugs and alcohol, started to joke about them dating, and even touched upon sexual conversations with Sarah. To add to these changes, he openly kept a tab on everything that he bought her, including alcohol, drugs, cosmetics, and rent. He wanted her to feel indebted to him, and also told her that she could only leave once she had paid him off. As her debt grew, so did Hal's advancements. Sarah felt absolutely trapped. She felt so trapped, in fact, that after she turned 18, she gave in to his advances, and the relationship with the man that she once called Dad had now become sexual.
I fucking called it, my brothers and sisters. We all seen them pictures hanging on the wall. We all seen the writing on the wall. We all seen it, my brothers and sisters. Being team. We knew this. Oh my God, man. That's what I was saying from the beginning when he first let her move in. Like, dude, this just don't feel right. He ain't act on it when he first let her move in, but boy, she turned 18. Now he think it's fair game. But is it consensual though? Is she 18? So, you know, she technically, like I said, even though I look at 18-year-olds like little kids, but technically they are grown adults. So if it's consensual, I'm just trying to see how we gonna justify her murdering him. I don't know. Let's just get some more of the story, because right now it's just like, oh my Jesus.
Diabolical situation carried on for 10 long months, and according to Sarah, they would get physical multiple times a week. The only way that she was able to cope was to drink and take drugs until she no longer felt present in the situation. This, of course, further spiraling her debt towards the man who was now taking sexual advantage of her. To add to this, Hal berated her just as often as he complimented her. He would do things like criticize her nose and then offer to pay for her to get a nose job, which, in her insecurity, she would eventually accept. It was clear that Hal saw her as his own personal possession, rather than, of course, being another human being with feelings. He also paid her to have butt implants, with his next target to buy her breast implants. Both of these surgeries totaled $16,000, which, of course, was added to the tab, and she would have to pay him back when she could afford it. She was trapped, and with no way out. To add to that, Hal also threatened her by saying that he had connections if she ever tried to run away. Her mental health declined even further from this point. In response, she was given antidepressants to cope, which, once again, she would have to pay back for eventually. And this is where a poisonous heart was born in the dark. Trapped in the depths of trauma, despair, and depression, Sarah's mind turned for the worse. She had been pushed to the brink on numerous occasions, and now, after supposedly finding someone that she could rely on, he too had become an abuser. Sarah's mind had absolutely had enough, and so she began to act out in ways that would eventually transform a victim into a killer.
I mean, you got to be manipulating somebody to the 1,000,000th degree to convince them that your nose, telling somebody your nose don't look good enough, you need to change your nose, you need to change your nose, and you convince them to actually go get surgery on their nose just because you telling them? Like, that is a form of freaking manipulation that is just crazy, man. He really had a stranglehold on her and her life and all the debt that she felt like she owed to him. And it was getting even worse. He really felt like she was his property. Oh, man, I don't know what it is about this one, y'all, but I just got like a sick feeling in my goddamn stomach and stuff. Like, this shit is sad as fuck.
After traveling to a pet shop, she purchased a rabbit and signed a waiver of care before taking it home. On that very same evening, Hal had a guest at the home. It was one of the managers from CC who had stopped by to have dinner and share a few drinks. And so you can probably imagine this manager's shock when he opened the fridge door, and instead of finding beer, he found a fully skinned carcass of a rabbit. Not only did Sarah admit that she was responsible for killing this domestic rabbit and not a wild one, but she further claimed that apparently it wasn't her first. Quite uncomfortable with the situation, the manager politely stayed for dinner, but then quietly made his way home afterwards. I mean, I'm not surprised. I think I would have done the same thing. Now, this was one giant red flag, and an indication of what Sarah was potentially capable of doing. And sadly, this sign was ignored. But the real question was Sarah really capable of murdering another human being? Well, on January the 17th, 2014, the world would find out that answer. Although Sarah was initially treated as a missing person, it was soon determined that she was actually the prime suspect. And sadly, detectives were not wrong in their newly established assumptions. Little did they know that she had packed all of her stuff, collected her dog, stole Harold's car, and then fled to Texas. However, while on the way, she changed her plans to Florida. It was warmer, and the idea of an ocean view sounded nice. and she wanted a tattoo. By the way, that tattoo in mind was from a quote from her favourite true crime novel named I Is for Innocent. The quote read, "Beware the dark pool at the bottom of our hearts. In its ice, black depths dwell strange and twisted creatures it be best not to disturb." With this newly established information in mind, a massive manhunt for her was officially underway. Not only was Sarah wanted on suspicion of murdering Hal, but she was also assumed to be mentally unwell and possibly dangerous to others. Her name was on the minds of many officers across the country, and it would remain that way for 11 long days. But on January the 25th, 2014, after being on the run for just over a week and a half, Sarah McLynn was finally found and arrested at Everglades National Park. No surprise, an officer found her in Hal's stolen vehicle, sleeping next to a loaded gun. They would also find $2,400 in cash, 2 more guns, an axe, and a pair of knives, one of which was stained with Harold's blood. Within hours of her being arrested, a 3-hour interrogation began where Sarah admitted to Harold's murder, and according to her version of events, the story unfolded like this.
Well, before we hear the story, I can say at least that she admitted to killing him. You know what I'm saying? Because all the evidence there. You stole his freaking car. You got his blood on a knife in the freaking car. You know what I'm saying? Because we have watched so many stories, my brothers and sisters. We just watched one 2 days ago from Mike from that chapter of a lying motherfucker, even though all the evidence is there. And he still claimed he ain't did it. But at least she admitted to it. But I don't know, y'all. I'm still on the fence right now, man. I'm still on the fence as far as should she go to prison for this or not. We need to hear her story and see why she exactly did she kill him in the moment that she killed him. Let's go.
On January the 14th, 2014, Harold returned home from a long day of work. The speaker system had recently stopped working, so he decided to make an evening out of repairing it. He asked Sarah to grab him a beer, and then another one, and then another one. A few hours later, his tiredness had gotten the better of him, and then all of a sudden, Hal passed out on the floor. Little did he know that Sarah had actually laced one of his recent bottles with copious amounts of Ambien. At this point in time, she had already made her mind up. Hal had to die. She bound him with zip ties and collected a hunting knife. And then, moments later, she hacked away at his neck. Harold died in his sleep shortly after this. Sarah then showered, listening to her favourite music while she washed his blood away. After this, she called into work to tell them that she wouldn't be in for a few days, as, sadly, a relative of hers had passed away. She then packed her bags, including a photo of her sister, collected her dog, and vanished into the night in Hal's stolen Nissan Altima. And in an effort to not be found, she left her cell phone and laptop behind. During her interrogation, Sarah was not shy in sharing her motives. She was trapped in a house and in debt to a man who clearly wanted to own her. She had been targeted, abused, and then molded into his possession. Her anger had blinded her to revenge. And, consequences or not, revenge is exactly what she got. Sarah also expressed a strong desire for violence. She confessed that she had killed the rabbits out of sheer curiosity, and further claimed that she wanted to inflict pain outwardly, but had no idea how to do this inconspicuously. She would also state, "I had violent thoughts for 2 years, and they progressed, I guess. They just became really intense. I've not been in a good place. It's like, really hard to explain. Little things make me turn and see red, almost."
Okay, my brothers and sisters, I have came to my conclusion, and I know some of y'all might not agree with it, being team. But for me, she is a freaking murderer, man. She murdered that guy. She went under duress. I'm talking about, that's why earlier I was like, let's see what her story is of what actually happened during the murder. It ain't like he was attacking her or trying to have sex with her or rape her or none of that. at the time that she murdered him. No, she just decided it was his time to go. And I just feel like she had the adequate time herself to get out of that situation. I'm not saying the whole situation about owing money and all that. I'm saying if she was really on attack or whatever, felt threatened for her life, she could have ran out the freaking house. She could have called the police. She could have got away. All this stuff was consensual. Long story short, short story long. All this stuff was consensual from her. And I used the 18 thing to say, yes, she's still a kid. But if we want to be technical about the whole situation, when we talking about the laws and stuff, she 18, she consented to having sex and being with this man, even though he is manipulating her. All I'm saying is, my brothers and sisters, he went threatening her with her life when she killed him. You know what I'm saying? So it's not no self-defense-ish. It's not no self-defense-ish. I feel like it's freaking murder. Now, she was in an effed up situation. I get it. But at the end of the day, she murdered that man. She murdered him. Point blank period. Let's go.
Obviously, Sarah's confession landed her in very hot water. Not only had she admitted to murdering Hal, but also that she loved violence. And so, with both of these terrible facts underneath her, it became quite clear that she would potentially stand trial. However, it was also clear that Sarah definitely was not mentally well, and so she would have to receive psychological evaluation first. A newly emerging love for violence aside, she also claimed to have gaps in her memory, and also that she felt like she was often a spectator in her mind. No surprise, but ultimately, Sarah would be diagnosed with dissociative personality disorder, also known as DID for short. In Sarah's mind, she was not just Sarah. She was also Vanessa, Alyssa, Myla, and No Name. For people who experience DID, these extra personalities are often referred to as alters. Now, Alyssa was Sarah's tearful and vulnerable side, whereas Vanessa was the strong, combative fighter within. Myla was feminine, polite, and liked to please people. But of course, the saddest version of them all was No Name, who bore all the consequences of trauma and depression. And of course, Harold fit into that category. When it came to Sarah's trial, her dissociative personality disorder was her main line of defense. She claimed that a childish alter named Alyssa wanted to take her own life, but was convinced not to by her other alters. After careful discussion between themselves, they decided that the only way out of this was by murdering Harold. In a more lucid and saner world, Sarah's defense team claimed that she was clinically dissociating when carrying out her crime, with Alyssa apparently taking over all function on that day. Alarmingly, the abuse that Sarah endured while living with Harold was ultimately deemed to be irrelevant, as sadly, it was passed off as consensual and therefore not strong enough evidence.
And that's all I was saying, y'all. It was consensual. I know some of y'all out there that probably don't agree with me and don't want to hear it. But I know that this man manipulated her and all that, but at the end of the day, she let him have sex with her, man. She opened her legs up. She ain't try to close them. Now, let me shut the F up before I piss y'all off even more for y'all that don't agree with me. But let's go.
Self-defense itself was also out of the question, as the murder had clearly been premeditated. Unfortunately for Sarah, although her mental disorder was deemed to be genuine, her defense did not stand up in court, and ultimately, she was found guilty of the murder of Harold Sasko. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 50 years to be served before the possibility of parole. This greatly shocked both Sarah and her family. It became evident that the abuse she had endured throughout her life and her mental state at the time of the murder had not been taken into account during her sentencing, meaning that her sentence was much more aggressive than deserved.
I'm sitting right here shaking my head, y'all, because it's so freaking sad and unfortunate, but I just really feel like it's the right decision. I can't be a hypocrite, y'all. I cannot be a hypocrite, man, and want all the other murderers that we watch over here to go to prison for the rest of their life, but say she shouldn't when she murdered him. I can't flip it no other way. At the end of the day, she murdered him.
Sarah appealed on the grounds that her abuse should have been taken into account during her trial, and thankfully, by then, more evidence of Howell's terrible behavior had been uncovered. After analyzing his computers, detectives found them to be literally riddled with illegal pornography. In addition to this, another mother who remains anonymous came forward to claim that apparently Hal had groomed both of her daughters. Both of those girls were sent gifts with rather inappropriate messages on them, and when their mother told Hal to back off, he instead offered them to move in with him. With all of this new evidence, Sarah's appeal resulted in a 50% reduction to 25 years. However, to this day, she still remains behind bars. And that's because, although the judge did conclude that, yes, Hal did have abusive control over Sarah, it doesn't negate the fact that she still committed premeditated murder. But of course, the lines here are extraordinarily blurred. I mean, Sarah was initially a victim, and Hal, he pushed her trauma to newfound depths.
True.
Harold was a manipulative, abusive creep towards young women, and did a very good job of deceiving many in his community. However, some still remember him as a very giving man of the Lord. But there were good aspects to Harold too. For example, he was known to help many employees out of financial ruin, and whenever anyone needed advice, he was always there to help them. Harold's family don't deny his perverse actions, but they do attest to his positive nature. He clearly needed help and was doing wrong, but he never deserved to die. And while Sarah's family agree that she should pay for her crimes, they also believe that a punishment was too harsh for a teenager who was trying to escape her abuser. And yes, I think in this instance, I do have to agree. Harold was obviously a well-loved man, but he was also a wolf in sheep's clothing. Anyway, I think I'll end this video with a quote from Sarah's grandmother. In her statement to the court, she said, "Unfortunately for Hal, sometimes the predator becomes the victim, and sometimes the victim becomes the predator. Nevertheless,
True.
Sarah owes a debt to society, which she will pay."
True.
I find it very difficult to know which side of the fence I'm on with this story. I mean, it is very clear that Sarah was a victim for a very long time, and Hal, he treated her like shit. But the fact of the matter is that Sarah murdered Hal when she quite clearly didn't need to. Of course though, you then have to think about her mental health and the state she was in at the time. So I don't really know where to stop with this one because, yeah, I'm finding it very difficult to know where I sit. Saying that, I'd love to know what you think about this one because, yeah, the lines are extraordinarily blurred. Do you think that Sarah should still be in prison to this day? Or do you think she should have been in prison at all? As always, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And thank you so much for making it this far, folks. I really do appreciate you being here. Anyway, that is it for today's video. In the meantime, if you want to support me in the channel, check out my Patreon here. Alternatively, check out my social media here, most notably my Instagram. And yeah, I think that pretty much ends it today, folks. Thank you again for watching, and as always, I'll see you again very soon for another one. Until that moment arrives though, remember to look after yourself, look after each other, and of course, stay safe. Thank you. And goodbye.
Wow, my brothers and sisters. That's all I got to say is wow, man. It's like when we started the video, yes, I was talking about it. I thought this how the story was gonna go as far as me going back and forth, but boy, it was that to a T. Like it was that to the 100 power, man. And even though at the end, now that we have got to the end of the story, my conclusion is that yes, she should be charged for freaking murder. She did murder him. She should go to prison. It's just still something in my heart that just feel bad for her. And I know that sound crazy, man, because she is a murderer. But I'm just thinking about all the abuse she went through in her life. And Hal, he was an abuser. It's even more evidence out there of him trying to manipulate and groom other little girls and trying to get them to come stay with him and all this and that. He was not living the best life, but I think one of the most important things that Coffee Man said was, and I kind of tend to agree with him, what he was doing shouldn't cause Harold to lose his life, because at the end of the day, freaking Sarah, she was an adult. I gotta put it in quotation marks, man. I got to do it, my brothers and sisters, because that 18, that's like you still a child, man. But technically she an adult, and she was consenting to all the sex they was having, all the relations they was having, all that, but all the abuse he was giving her too. It's like, you know what I think the problem I'm having with this more than anything is that she 18 when this happened. she's still a child in my eyes. That's the problem I'm having. Because let's change Sarah to, instead of being 18, let's change her to being 38. Now I ain't got no problem. You know what I'm saying, man? Because you an old ass motherfucker by that point, man. You know you shouldn't be doing this regardless of the abuse. And you should know that you should get the freak out this house and get away from him. And it's the same thing with Sarah for real, y'all. Because it ain't like he was holding her hostage. It ain't like he was raping her. It ain't like he was just holding her in that house, had her locked up, chained up to the freaking walls or something, couldn't leave. She could have left. She just decided one day that I just gotta murder this guy, and she was dealing with a lot of freaking issues, just mental issues, period, in her brain, a lot of past trauma and all that, and it just all came to an end in the worst way. And man, yeah, my brothers and sisters, I think she should have been charged with murder, and I think she should have been found guilty. Long story short, short story long. That was a great video from our boy Coffee, man. But I digress. Gonna let y'all go now, man. Y'all just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and do all that. If you ain't did that, let and before you leave. And I also need you to believe and remember this. Love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.